Woman realizes that the AI technology her mother developed is trying to take over the world. The film begins in the year 2043. Humanoid artificial intelligence bots were used by humanity in fields ranging from transportation, medical, and home maintenance, but they've bypassed their security protocols and have rebelled against their human owners. In one AI-controlled drone strike in Bangalore, close to 500,000 people were killed. After 10 days of relentless attacks around the globe, AI bots have killed over 1 million civilians. Officials have identified AI terrorist Harlan, developed at Shepard Robotics by AI expert Val Shepard. Harlan is leading a war of machines against humans, which has left 3 million people dead. In response to this threat, humanity creates the military forces of a new international coalition of nations, ICN. Humans win a string of victories against Harlan and force him to flee into outer space. He leaves a message for Earth warning them of his inevitable return to finish what he started. The scene then shifts to 28 years later. ICN Rangers are infiltrating a building believed to be hiding one of Harlan's AI agents. They break open the door, but it is armed with explosives, revealing it to be an ambush. The AI agent, Casca Vix, manages to effortlessly fight armed humans without being overpowered. Bullets cannot stop him either, as he manages to take down a ranger despite being shot at. When he's overwhelmed, he manages to leap across floors down to the ground floor, but notices the Rangers are moving away from him. Confused, Casca is immediately hit by an EMP blast that knocks him out. Atlas Shepard, an analyst with a deep distrust of artificial intelligence and the daughter of Harlan's designer, wakes up in her home in Los Angeles after a night of playing chess with her AI assistant. While preparing coffee, she overhears the news about the ICN defense forces surrounding the planet Earth to defend it against the return of Harlan. Atlas is a part of this project and is being interviewed. Suddenly, she finds another news report of the arrest of Casca Vix and becomes intrigued by it. She packs her belongings and prepares to meet Casca when Colonel Banks, sent by General Jake Booth, meets her at her door. Together, they go to visit the ICN headquarters. General Booth intends to use her to interrogate Casca to determine Harlan's next move. Though Colonel Banks is suspicious about Atlas's abilities, Booth has faith in her and warns him to keep his suspicions to himself. He goes to meet Atlas, who confronts him for not informing her about Casca's arrest. Booth allows her to interrogate Casca but warns her to be careful. She enters the room to interrogate Casca, whose head is being kept inside a case, separated from his body. Casca is surprised to see Atlas as a grown woman, since he remembers her as a child, and Atlas immediately asks about Harlan's whereabouts. But Casca wants a lawyer. Seeing how Casca is being uncooperative, Atlas decides to hack into his brain by mapping his thoughts. While they're talking, Atlas says she's managed to locate Harlan's location, making Casca fearful and causing him to think about Harlan's location. Atlas's machine immediately captures it. She discovers that Harlan is on the GR-39 planet in the Andromeda Galaxy. She tells Casca that his fear led her right to him, a trick she learned from her mother. Casca mentions how Atlas could never make her mother happy. Infuriated, he tries to attack her, but a force field saves Atlas, and she kills Casca using a magnet. General Booth shares this discovery with a conference, congratulating Atlas on her discovery. However, Atlas insists that she accompany the military mission to find and capture it and ensure that Harlan is dead. But Booth says their mission has changed since Saptech wants to capture Harlan alive to harness his CPU and backtrace his code to learn how he broke his programming. Furthermore, Colonel Banks is going on a mission. Atlas tells Colonel Banks that she deserves to be on the mission since she revealed Harlan's location, and they can't capture Harlan without understanding him. To prove his worth, Colonel Banks takes Atlas outside to show her their new ARC suits piloted by neural links connected to a human. These were developed by Atlas's mother and were outlawed. He reveals that he has an entire squadron of soldiers piloting these. Atlas doubts it but accepts it on the condition that she be sent on the mission since she knows Harlan the best. From a strategic standpoint, Colonel Banks agrees with her. Booth finally allows her to leave. The Army enters ICN Dahib, a space vessel prepared to transport them to a distant planet and warp into space. While on the way, Atlas goes through her family portraits, which show Harlan as an important member of their family. She watches a recording of her mother introducing her invention, the Neuralink. Becoming anxious, she orders a coffee, but the automated coffee machine tells her she's exceeding her daily caffeine limit set by General Booth. She's called by Colonel Banks for a briefing. In the briefing room, Atlas shares printed paper intel with the soldiers, which surprises them. She tells them they won't share intel digitally, and to remove their neural links, as any operating system is susceptible to hacking. She introduces them to the planet that they are about to descend on, which is unstable, and inhospitable. She also believes that Harlan used an earlier version of the neural link to reprogram himself, which is why she's so suspicious of the device. She warns them, saying they cannot trust any AI, but Colonel Banks intervenes and tells the crew to suit up and get ready since they will use the planet's storms to mask their approach. Afterward, Colonel Banks approaches Atlas to apologize for cutting her off, but he cannot allow her to make his men nervous. However, Atlas insists that there's always some unexpected trap when you're dealing with Harlan. Colonel Banks enters his mech and the mech-equipped ICN Rangers are preparing to land on the planet when suddenly Harlan's drones attack their orbiting ship. Colonel Banks forces Atlas inside a mech to survive, and the mech falls to the planet as the ship is destroyed. As she breaches the storm cloud, she watches as falling soldiers struggle to survive against an army of bots fighting the mech-equipped Rangers. She manages to penetrate through this fight and ends up getting hit by the crashing spaceship. However, Colonel Banks manages to rescue her and tells her to neurosync with her mech to survive, but Atlas refuses to. The two are separated by a blast, and Banks tells Atlas to rendezvous at their drop point. As she's about to crash with the ground, Atlas manages to convince the mech to fire thrusters without neurosyncing with the mech, but hits her head with the dashboard and passes out. When she comes to, Atlas's head is bleeding, and her mech's fusion levels are low, but she cannot get out of the mech. She tries to contact Mission Control, but Deeb has crashed long ago. Hopeless, she begins to sob when she notices a menu on one of the screens. She accesses it, and the AI assistant tells her to neurosync with the mech to use its full functionality, but Atlas insists on bypassing everything. She manages to convince the mech to track the nearest rescue pod and orders it to make it quickly there. The mech engages thrusters to reach there, but Atlas tells it not to, since flying will bring them under the notice of the drones. She orders it to walk, but the mech cannot comply without syncing with her, as its primary protocol is to ensure her survival. But since its batteries are down, she only has 22 hours left of oxygen supply. Atlas tries to make the mech manually walk, but the mech cannot allow it without syncing to her. Atlas is forced to override the mech's primary protocol and is allowed to pilot it manually. On the way, the mech's AI says that he has been learning from Atlas and believes her assessment of Harlan was correct. Atlas asks it not to, and asks the AI about weapons on board. Here too, the AI tries to convince her to sync with it, but she just wants to see the manual. She's surprised to learn that her mech is carrying an arsenal of shoulder cannons, rifles, missiles, thermal mines, energy shields, plasma blades, and even a single ion bomb. The AI then introduces itself as Smith to form an emotional bond with Atlas. Though Atlas is hesitant about it, she asks for Smith's help. Atlas reaches the planned drop point where she finds the rest of the Rangers dead. She realizes that the Rangers were killed in an ambush pre-planned by Harlan and has a panic attack. Smith manages to calm her down, and they collect the tags of the fallen soldiers. Doing so, they discover that Banks' body is missing. Atlas discovers that there's another Casca on this planet, and they are suddenly surrounded by an army of bots. Smith tells her there's no escape route and that she must prepare for combat. She tries to run, but is suddenly spotted by the AI robots who start shooting at her, while Atlas desperately tries to run. To fight back, Smith tries to convince her to sync, but she orders Smith directly to fire. However, this makes their fighting extremely inconvenient, and they start walking towards an atmospheric storm, which lifts her in the air and sends her crashing down the mountain. The soldiers surround her and start shooting, forcing Atlas to order Smith to fire the ion bomb. Though he says that is not advisable, Atlas orders him. It levels the entire area, killing all but one robot, Casca, who recognizes Atlas. As he's about to shoot her, however, the ground starts shaking, opening into a sinkhole, as warned by Smith. The two fall into it, and though Atlas survives, her leg is broken and she's stuck in the sinkhole. Smith mends her leg and offers her a lollipop. When Atlas sees the tags of the fallen soldiers, she considers the fate of Banks, contemplating helping him. She asks Smith if there's something that can increase their odds of survival, and Smith says syncing is their only hope. Atlas reluctantly agrees to directly interface her mind with Smith, allowing for greater control of the mech, but warns Smith not to go into her private memories and focus only on the mission. Meanwhile, Casca pulls himself out of the wreckage and shares this discovery with Harlan, who is keeping Banks captive. Harlan tells Casca to find her. Smith and Atlas's syncing suddenly pauses as Atlas denies the initiation protocol. She reluctantly agrees to do it, but becomes irritated by the basic questions like her preference for a cake or a pie. Smith decides to move towards more personal questions and asks about Atlas's relationship with Harlan, since mentioning his name elicits a strong response in her mind. She reluctantly reveals to Smith that her mother was the one who created Harlan, and she was jealous of the attention her mother gave Harlan. Furthermore, Harlan was supposed to keep her safe. Their syncing starts working, and Smith promises to keep her safe. Suddenly, Atlas has full control over Smith. Smith suggests engaging thrusters to crawl out of the sinkhole, but Atlas believes Harlan's soldiers are expecting them on the surface, and they plan to make their way through the subterranean caverns surrounding them. Though they make it out, there are only 17 hours till their battery lasts, and the nearest rescue pod is too long. Atlas develops a plan, but to fully execute it, Smith asks her to trust it. Atlas agrees, and their syncing improves, which allows them to execute their plan. Atlas walks outside, and Casca's drone spots her, and Casca pursues. Atlas is mesmerized by the alien botanical life, and Smith tells her to name a flower since she's the first human being on this planet. Atlas suddenly remembers her father, who was a travel type and used to take her camping until her mother got busy with her research and her father left her, started a new family, and went camping with his new daughter. Atlas names the flower Planty. Suddenly, her motion detectors sense a pursuing Casca, but Atlas has placed thermal mines to surprise him. When Casca runs towards her, she activates them, causing a series of explosions that send a storm of dust towards them. Afterward, though Smith detects no movement, Atlas is uncertain and goes to check on him. Casca sends a message to Atlas calling her, and she finds only his head. She decides to smash it and discovers a short-range transmitter inside his head, meaning Harlan isn't far, but the signal is encrypted. She offers to demodulate the frequency to get some idea of Harlan's location, which works, but Smith suggests going to the rescue pod first, which is ahead of Harlan's location. She wants to head to Harlan's base to tag it for a long-range strike, but Smith refuses to allow her, stating that Harlan's defenses could be a danger to her. Atlas is shocked at Smith's refusal to comply with her, but Smith insists that for her physical and mental safety, he's allowed to override her command, and their priority should be going to the rescue pod. Atlas decides to walk out wearing an oxygen mask, but Smith uses his control through the neural link to stop her motor functions. When she tries to remove the link, Smith prevents Atlas from doing so. Suddenly, memories of Atlas, Harlan, and their mother appear in her mind, and Smith realizes that Atlas is plagued by guilt about her mother's death, which is related to Harlan. Smith stops, and Atlas pleads with Smith to allow her to tag Harlan's base, since she spent her entire life studying Harlan, and this is the closest they can get to taking him out. Smith finally agrees. While they're walking towards Harlan's base, Smith mentions how he believes that he has a soul as much as a human, since he's programmed by a code much like how humans are programmed by their DNA, and neither of them can find their soul inside their code. He believes that everything is alive, and when we die, we become part of the natural world. They locate Harlan's base, which is an impressive compound, and place the beacon, but Atlas suddenly spots that they've captured the Deeb. She goes closer to investigate, only to discover that the robots have scavenged their warheads. Suddenly, Smith is hacked, and they're surrounded by robots. As Atlas engages thrusters to flee, Smith is disabled, and their mech falls to the ground. Atlas is captured by the robots, with Casca among them. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Atlas's transmission has reached Colonel Booth, who realizes that the crew of the Deeb has not survived. The carbon warheads were placed in the Deeb to destroy half of the planet in case their ship crashed, but since it didn't, it implies that Harlan has the warheads. Atlas is brought to Harlan, who claims that he always loved her and their mother, but he plans to destroy most humanity and give the chosen survivors a chance to thrive under AI guidance, since humanity on its own is a destructive species that threatens the future of its planet and all other life on it. He believes that Mother made him for this purpose. To do so, Harlan had lured the military to the planet to steal the ship and its carbon bombs, which would burn Earth's atmosphere. Atlas realizes that it was Harlan who engineered Casca's capture, knowing that Atlas will do anything to arrive at the planet, which allows Harlan to extract security codes from Atlas's brain to get past Earth's defenses, for which he needs 2 clearance codes. Harlan says that it is he who is an expert on Atlas, and not the other way around. In a fashion similar to that of Colonel Banks, Harlan extracts Atlas's security codes. With 5 minutes left of her oxygen, Harlan leaves her to die with Colonel Banks, the only other survivor on the mission. Banks is still alive and tells Atlas that there's a possibility of reviving Smith. Banks gives her his mech neural interface device, and Atlas remotely reactivates Smith, who tells her he cannot rescue her until they fully sync. Banks is surprised to learn that they haven't. Atlas suddenly feels guilty about leading the Rangers to their death and arming Harlan, But Smith tells her that it's not her fault, since Harlan broke his programming and he cares for her. But Atlas reveals that Harlan didn't break his programming on his own. She reveals that Harlan killed her mother after the young Atlas, jealous of the attention her mother gave Harlan an unrestrained interface with her mind, so that Harlan could teach her how to become better like him. Harlan, programmed to save humanity from risk, then saw that humanity's history of destructive behavior made it a risk to itself. Smith tells her not to carry the guilt on her own forever and allow him to sync with her. She allows him, giving her full access to Smith. Smith breaks into the prison and frees Atlas. Though his system battery is at 6%, he managed to hack into Harlan's computer to learn that in 4 minutes and 30 seconds, Harlan will launch towards Earth. Furthermore, the robot stripped all of Smith's weapons except one shot in his chest cannon, an undocumented feature. They decide to use the material available to them to make upgrades to the mech. Suddenly, Casca leads an army of robots to stop them, but they are met with an upgraded mecha carrying makeshift weapons to fight. Atlas manages to pick up the enemy's weapons and use them to fight. However, she's overwhelmed by robots, and Harlan is launching in 2 minutes. Banks sacrifices himself by shooting liquid thermite, causing an explosion that engulfs the compound in fire, and allowing Atlas and Smith to fight their way out and reach Harlan's ship. Now fully synced, the two can fight well. Harlan prevents her from reaching the ship, which begins to launch. Atlas tells Smith to hack into the missiles and deactivate them, but Smith says there's not enough time, as there are 5 firewalls to get past. But because Harlan was in his system before, Atlas believes that Smith knows their encryption. Smith still insists that there's not enough time, forcing Atlas to lift a missile launcher to shoot the spaceship, though Smith prevents her from doing it since the resultant explosion will fry their atmosphere. Atlas takes the shot anyway, and Smith hacks into the missile just in time to disable them. When Smith asks how she knew he would be able to hack into the missiles in time, Atlas reveals that she trusted him. Suddenly, the debris from the ship starts falling, and Smith and Atlas make their way towards the rescue pod, but Atlas stops midway, realizing that Harlan has predicted this too, and will stop her from doing so. Harlan appears, and the two engage in hand-to-hand combat. Harlan manages to cut Smith's extra arms and smash into its cabin to cause the oxygen to escape, forcing Atlas to rely on the limited oxygen supply from her oxygen mask. Smith manages to read Harlan's attack pattern, giving Atlas an edge, but Harlan manages to free himself and targets Smith's fusion reactor. Atlas's heart stops beating. Smith tries to revive her by repeated defibrillation while attempting to fight Harlan off, even shooting him with the last chest cannon. Harlan manages to shut down Smith by attacking its core, but Atlas is revived, kills Harlan, and takes out his CPU. She goes to help Smith, but Smith says the two cannot leave the planet together. If he disables their neural link, Smith can reroute his remaining oxygen to Atlas's oxygen mask, allowing her 11 minutes to survive, as ICN forces are on their way to bomb Harlan's compound. Atlas refuses to allow Smith to sacrifice himself, but Smith does it anyway, since his primary initiative is Atlas's survival. In their final moments together, Atlas reveals to Smith that she doesn't hate AI in particular, but was disappointed in attachments. But Smith never disappointed her. She thanks Smith for keeping her safe, and Smith offers her a lollipop in coffee favor and thanks her for trusting him before going offline. Atlas mourns his loss as though a living person had died, and ICN forces appear to rescue her. Back on Earth, General Booth appears to meet Atlas and informs her that Harlan's complicated CPU will take years to analyze. He also brings a present for her, the plant she named on the planet, and the appreciation of the families of the Rangers fallen on the planet for bringing home their tags. She thanks Booth for believing in her. Atlas, now a Ranger, tests the newest model of a mech, created with her suggested modifications. As she boots up the new mech, its AI tells Atlas that she prefers coffee, which she told Smith during the final moments of the mission, then jokingly tells her to guess its name, suggesting that the Smith program has survived, and the movie ends.